at the Central Bank with regards to the demonstration that was held, asking for him to resign. So we're going to, some housekeeping rules, do us a favor. We're going to start the discussions. We will start with the first one, which is the IMF staff agreement, and we'll try and tease out the main issues that are in there. What may be the challenges? Can we be able to receive the next 600 million? Yes, with all the beautiful things or articles that we've seen from our colleague reporters across. I will take you through the first 3 pointers as was raised by the IMF itself, and then we will go into the nitty-gritties of it. Our guests will have 5 minutes to quickly make their points, and then we'll ask them some questions, and then after that, we'll allow you to come in with your thoughts and all that. So if you want to make a point or whatever, you hold on for now. When we allow for you to come in, you can send us a request. We would then approve for you to speak. Either you ask your question, your contribution, or make your statement as you want to make it. Other than that, you also can tweet at Norvan Reports, or yes, you tweet at Norvan Report with your questions or your comments with regards to tonight's program. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are just informing you that that's how it's going to be. After about, let's say, 45 minutes or 50 minutes, we would end the first discussion and go into the second one. That will also take the same approach. So it's a double header for us tonight. Bear with us. We'll try and do justice and discuss all the vexed matters with regards. But just before I start, let me take you through the statement and just read 3 of the main points that summarizes the whole statement as was issued by the IMF on the 25th of September, to us, and what it said. Now, this is the first point that it makes. It says, the IMF staff and the Ghanaian authorities have reached a star-level agreement on economic policies and reforms to conclude the first review of the 36-month ECF-supported program. Performance with respect to the program's targets and reform objective has been very strong. And then the point 2, it says, Ghana will have access to the 600 million in financing once the review is approved by the IMF management and formally completed by the IMF Executive Board. In that same point 2, it says, to ensure timely completion of the review, the country needs official creditors to quickly reach agreement on a debt treatment in line with the financing assurance they provided in May 2023. So take note of this. And then the third one says, the authorities' strong policy and reform commitment under the program is bearing fruit, and signs of economic stabilization are emerging. Growth in 2023 has proven more resilient than initially envisaged. Inflation has declined. That's what they say. The fiscal and external position have improved, and exchange rate has stabilized. Inflation has declined. Good enough? Not good enough? We will have the opportunity to discuss all this, ladies and gentlemen. So I want to thank our guests for making time to join us. Thank you very much, Professor Lord Mensah, who is if you don't know Professor Lord Mensah, he is with just to inform you, those of you who probably have joined us for the first time, Professor Lord Mensah is an associate professor at the Department of Finance at the University of Ghana Business School. And also we have Mr. Joe Jackson, who is the Director of Operations, Delex Finance. We will also be joined by Dr. Alex Ampabin, who's an economist and fiscal policy analyst. But thank you also very much for making time to join tonight's program. So I want to start with Professor Lord Mensah, and I'm sure he will let us understand what his thoughts are with regards to this whole statement and what sense it makes out of it. So, Prof, if you can take it away in the next 5 minutes, what do you make of the statements from the IMF, and what are the takeouts for you and the main things, and what are the challenges you see in there? Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much, Norvan, and thank you for those who joined the platform. Yeah, clearly, the IMF did their job, and every indication on the ground up to September indicate that we've been able to satisfy what is expected of us, locally. And if I should take you through some of the structural benchmarks that the finance minister indicated, and it was presented to the cabinet. The first one is to look at how they can streamline the statutory, funds, and that is just a way of publishing a strategy. And I don't think it would take an astronomical effort to publish a strategy. I mean, it is easily done. And from my inquiries from the Ministry of Finance, friends that tells me that yes, they did, justice to that. And the next one, which I know, is to publish a medium-term, revenue strategy by September ending. So these are indicators that the IMF will be looking at. And then, I mean, the next one is to approve, plans of all banks negotiated during the previous, quarters to rebuild capital buffers and initiate, corrective actions on institutions whose plans are not deemed what credible. I mean, in a way to promote financial stability. So you heard announcement of, I mean, banks recapitalization to promote, financial stability recently from the central bank. And then the last thing that was expected of Ghana locally was indexation of a structure to ensure that they are able to catch up with the LEAP beneficiaries, because the program has some social undertone or social safety net that needs to be, protected. So these are things that were expected of us, up to September end, and then taking into consideration the external, aspect of it, which is our engagement with external creditors. Now, for the external creditors, I think the speed at which we are moving has been a bit slow since our first engagement with them, that they gave us, the assurance that yeah, they are in support of the program. So effectively, yes, from my understanding, that is the main, problem that we are likely to face, going forward. But having external, creditors who understands the financial space, and then also having an appreciation of an African terrain that they were investing, I think getting, an agreement with them, will be quite easier. From where I sit, that is what is likely to delay or cause us, the 600, the second 600. But I am for sure that they will come into agreement because they really understand the investment space. And then also sovereign, like sovereign default. Ghana is not the first to default. I mean, we've had instances of, sovereign default across the globe. And I can tell you that most of those had delays with the external creditors, because the modalities and the frameworks to guide, sovereign, credit default, how to negotiate it was quite, difficult. But having examples across the globe now, Ghana will find it easier to have, at least even Zambia can be one of the benchmarks that they can use when you come to African, the African terrain. And then also looking at Greece and other countries that have defaulted, some time ago. And so with external creditor, I believe that we're going to get, an agreement with them. And that shouldn't be much of a problem, even though I foresee that to be something that will hinder us. In-house, we did our part, which they have given us that indication that the economy has seen some improvement. Numerically, we're looking at inflation dropping from 52 point something to 40 and above. And then also inflation having a what we call interest rate being, quite, stable. And then, exchange rate, having enjoyed some stability in that regard. These are the lens of, the IMF. But you see, these indicators that anytime IMF comes for a review, they look at are not the lens of a typical Ghanaian. The typical Ghanaian looks at the Ghanaian economy at his doorstep, as how he will be able to buy food, and when it comes to his salary, whether he will be able to keep the same consumption level, or smoothing his consumption level over the month ahead throughout the year. So the eyes of the IMF looking into the economy is completely different from what we the citizens look out for. As a citizen, I'm looking at how provision of health is at hand, for which I can easily access a facility and then have me attended to in case I am sick, and then also getting a good road and also to drive on, for it. I mean, to reduce how much I incur on my vehicle every now and then. These are things we are looking out for. But then, if the economy gains at the macro level, and we're not feeling it in our pocket, and for so many years, I think for the past 7 years, I can tell you that we have been witnessing serious economic growth to a point where 0.1%, which still Ghanaians were not feeling the economy as expected. So effectively, yes, they have given us the signal. We did our part as a country, but what I see going forward will be the creditor, external creditor agreement. But even that one, I don't think we're going to have much problem looking at the experiences that the external creditors have had in the past. Thank you, Norvan. Over to you. Hello, Norvan. Hello. Norvan, can you hear me, please? Hello, Norvan. What's happening? Hello.
Prof, I can hear you very clearly. This is Joe Jackson.
Yeah.
But it seems like we've lost
Norvan, right?
and thank you for your remarks. I will delve into my I would delve into my remarks as follows. First of all, getting this staff level agreement is good for this country. And I'm always grateful for the geopolitics that has placed Ghana space where there's a lot of goodwill for this country. And without that goodwill, I wonder whether we would have gotten the staff level agreement and possibly even the second tranche. And the truth of the matter is this: if you are interested in Ghana, then you would say that whatever the cause of the current problems that we are in, this bailout is a good thing. And getting a second tranche will alleviate some of the problems that we could make this whole period even more painful than it is now. So first of all, it's a good thing. It's a good thing because first and foremost, it's going to make sure that we get some exchange rate stability in this last quarter of the year. Now, the obvious risk there, since last year, December, we have not paid any of our debts. We raised our hand and we said we can't pay. Now, that in itself has helped reduce the demand on the dollar, because we haven't paid any of our foreign obligations. Now, in this last quarter, we're going to have to finish the agreement and start paying. That obviously would put some more pressure on the dollar. Secondly, fuel is our single biggest import into this country. Now, the fuel price has been good to us. It has been weaker than expected, but unfortunately, it is rising and rising fast. And this rise is also coinciding with the last quarter of the year, where the cold weather in the northern temperate zones means that demand for fuel will rise and the prices will traditionally rise. So we're facing two risks where the exchange rate, the relative exchange rate stability is concerned. The first one is that there will be increased pressure on the dollar because we have to pay our foreign debts. The second one will be the anticipated rise in the price of fuel. And the third is that when cocoa is not going to bring in as much money as it's done in previous years. If you noticed, the cocoa syndicated loan that we are expecting is only half the level, maybe even less than half the level it has been in previous years. So this 600 million would go a long way to shore up our exchange rates, and for that it is definitely a good thing. The other thing also is this: it reassures our debtors and foreign investors that Ghana is on the right track. Unfortunately, there are risks, and the risks are high. The first risk and most obvious risk is that we do have to come to some agreement with our foreign debtors on the treatment of our debt. And even though we have a framework agreement for that, and even though the fact that we haven't nailed and sealed the agreement gives some cause for disquiet, why has it taken so long? Why haven't we rapidly sealed those agreements? Is there some still existing resistance to doing the deal at the level at which Ghana is doing? The other question we have is, what level of the deal are we getting? And where does that lie in response in the whole context of debt sustainability? Remember that our domestic debt issues have not been fully resolved yet. We didn't get as far as reducing the domestic debt as we anticipated initially, partly because of exemptions, partly because some people just refused to sign up. And that was why we had to do the domestic debt, the third program. So all those issues are standing, and we have not yet signed up with, finished the negotiations with the independent power producers, who are also a huge part of our national debt stock. So there are risks ahead. Foreign debtors we haven't concluded, power we haven't concluded, and there are some other issues outstanding. If we don't conclude these things, we will not reach debt sustainability, and that puts that second tranche at risk. Finally,
okay, Mr. Jackson, can you hear me, please?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Very well. Okay. So please go ahead. Thank you very much.
Okay. Finally, we are racking up domestic debt service bills like it's going out of fashion. The treasury bill rate has now gone up to a weighted average cost above 31%. That is crazy, because as much as the domestic debt exchange did help us reduce our debt overhang, the rate at which we are adding on debt, and at this moment we've gone past 10 million in additional interest rate servicing this year, is 10 billion. That is crazy. So the next risk is, whereas we know that this government and this country cannot exist without borrowing, and maybe borrowing on treasury bills, is this rate going to be a risk to this country? Will it put our debt sustainability at a high risk? So to wrap up my comments, this is a good thing. It will bring some level of exchange rate stability, but the risks are high, and we should watch those risks carefully. Norvan, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Jackson. You have to stay right there for me because, I mean, you mentioned 2-3 important things that I thought are some of the risks that we need to look out for. And one of the things that you highlighted was the moment we get the agreement with the Paris Club's members, let me put it that way, it means that we must resume payment of our debts, which we have suspended for all this while, close to a year. How is that going to impact on our books? Because interest payment was almost at our brink, and we were almost drowning, and we had suspended these ones, especially the foreign one, where we needed to do this payment in foreign currency, not in cedi. And for that matter, you realize that it has contributed instability of our local currency as well. If we resume all this from where you sit as a businessman, would that derail the gains we have made so far after suspending these for a while? And would that throw even the program out of gear? And this is the question to you, Professor Lord Mensah, as well. Let me have Mr. Jackson answer first, and I'll come to you, Prof, please.
Okay, now, first of all, Norvan, let's be clear. The debt service will not be resumed at the same levels as it was before we suspended payment. The whole point of this agreement is to give us relief. So debt service would be resumed at a much lower level. But indeed, debt service puts at this moment zero pressure on the dollar because we are not paying at all. And whatever rate at which it is resumed, it will put some pressure, although much, much more reduced than it was before we suspended our debt services on the 18th of December last year. So it will put some pressure, but that pressure could result in a rise in the forex rates. But the pressure should be much, much lower than it was before. So will it derail our gains so far? I don't think so. But will it put pressure on the forex rates? Yes. And remember that this country has has a lot of forex-driven inflation. Because we import so much, every time the rates fall, the rates rise or fall, depending on where you're sitting, it puts a different pressure on inflation. So the gains that we've made in inflation may actually will plateau if the exchange rates, the cedi depreciates as a result of increased debt service from what is at the moment a zero level. Norvan, I hope that has answered your question.
Well, you've tried to answer the question. Let me hear what Prof also has to say with that.
Can you go back to the question for me, please?
So my whole point is, what will be the impact of resuming the debt service, especially with our foreign debtors, or you say the Paris Club, something that we have suspended since December last year because of this program? If we resume them, what will be its impact on our city's performance, and will that throw out of gear? Because if you look at all the performance indicators that were given us under this program, somewhat the suspension of this debt service to our foreign guys has played a role in ensuring that has freed the space for us. If we resume it, and if we get agreement with them, automatically we must resume. And when we resume it, what would be the impact?
So the impact, I can tell you that we're going to see the real value of the city. The real value of the city, in a sense that if you take the users or the demanders of the dollar or the foreign currency, we are categorize them into three. We have individuals, businesses, and then the government. The government over the years in our, certain or in our economic structure has been the biggest demander of the dollar, as far as its debt payment and all those are concerned. So if we have gotten some kind of stability over the years as a result of the suspension of our debt since last December, then obviously we should, look at whatever stability we are enjoying as more or less kind of artificial or a temporal stability. The real stability or the real value of the cedi against the dollar will be realized when government starts servicing its debt. Yes, of course, I do agree with Mr. Joe Jackson that the levels at which we'll be servicing our debt will not be the same as we going into after the negotiations. So that will reduce government, liabilities or government payment on, foreign, debt. Now the 600 million that we're going to receive, I can tell you that yes, it may play a role in helping us to, pay off some of this debt. And you see, the IMF is ensuring that we get a creditor, agreement before even the 600 is released, because they know very well that the purpose of the 600, if we don't get creditor agreement, they may not get, the purpose or what the 600 million is supposed to come and do in our economy. So effectively, we're going to realize the actual value of the dollar to the cedi to the dollar when government resumes, its debt service after we've gotten the external creditor agreement.
Is that to say, I'm throwing this question out to even those of you who are listening to us. At this point, I'm going to ask my last question. I'm going to allow you to also come in with your questions or your contributions. So you can either send us a request to be a speaker, and I'll allow you to ask your questions or make your contributions to this very first discussion that we are having. And then you can be part of the discussion. Prof, is that to say that the indicators that we are seeing now is artificial, and it's based on the fact that because all the economic variables have not been in the basket, and one major one like these external creditors funding had been debts where the interest payment had been suspended, so we are not seeing the real value of our currency and how the economy is supposed to perform, because monies that were supposed to be moving out of the economy is not moving. And this is around the time when we know that a lot of importation also takes place. So around this time, you see that importers need to bring in products. Some will say maybe as early as June and the rest, they have probably gone to their banks and asked for these funding and the dollars to be able to do this. We know some of them actually even purchase the dollar on the market here and take it to their banks as well and ask them to transfer on their behalf. Should we say that the performance of the economy throughout all this period, and as the IMF is starting the good performance of the economy, has been artificial, Prof?
Yes, okay. So, looking at the demand for the dollar by traders and importers and all those are seasonal aspect of predicting, how the dollar will behave. Going forward. So I'm holding that constant. But then what I'm so concerned will be when government starts servicing its debt. As we speak now, in terms of debt obligations, government was operating below the capacity of its debt obligations as a result of the suspension of its external debt. So when the government comes to full scale of debt service, even though we're going to have reductions in interest rate and, principal reductions and all those as a result of, whatever will come out through the external debt restructuring, okay, government would definitely start servicing its debt. And that is when we're going to realize, the full scale of that government obligations as far as its debt service is concerned. And so we shouldn't expect the economy to remain the same. That is why I mentioned earlier that whatever we are enjoying now looks like more or less a kind of quasi, economic stability. But then when the government starts operating and then being, takes over its debt obligations fully, we'll see the real value of the dollar. So that's what it means.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much, Prof. Ladies and gentlemen, we open the floor. If you have a question or you want to contribute to the discussion at this point, you're allowed to send us a request, and then we'll allow you to come in and ask your question for this first part. We told you that today is a double header. We are looking at the staff level agreement and its impact on you and I, our pockets and all that. And then at some point, we now shift to look at the comments from the central bank governor with regards to the demonstration that was held, somewhere last week. The kind of comments that came from him, describing the demonstrators' move as being hooliganism and, saying that it is very unacceptable for them to, have, done what they did. So, Okateche, I've invited you as a speaker. If you can cancel it. Okateche Kobna, can you please accept it? Sorry. Just accept the request for us, and then we can make you a speaker. You can ask your question. Okateche, if you can accept, I've sent you a request myself. I think when we're trying to accept your request, we lost you. But Mr. Jackson, I'm sure you've heard what Prof has said. He sees what is happening now as not the real running of our economy, and as I was saying, he sees it as artificial. But before you come in, Mr. Jackson, just hold on for me. Let's hear from Okateche Kobna. Okateche, please go ahead. Okateche, if you can unmute yourself and speak. Yeah. Wow. I don't know if anybody can hear Okateche because I can't hear him from my end here. Mr. Jackson?
Yeah,
same here. I can't hear him either.
Oh.
Okay, Okateche, you probably have to check what is happening. Your mic is unmuted, but we can't hear anything you're saying. Hello, Okateche. Okay, sorry. Let me hear Mr. Jackson. The question that I put to you, Mr. Jackson, yeah.
Okay, now, Norvan, one of the things that we all have to accept is that the current situation, the current relative stability in the CD is contrived. And depending on where you sit, you could say that is an extremely smart move by declaring a default very early so that we reduce pressure on the CD. But whatever it is, it's a facade. Once we resume debt service, once the other pressures kick in, we're going to see some volatility and possibly some depreciation of the CD. So in that sense, this last quarter, we at Dalex Finance have actually revised our CD dollar rates to reflect the expectation that the government will start debt service and put extra pressure on the CD.
Then invariably, Prof, we should not be extremely happy about and tout our credentials about what we are being told by the IMF as to the performance of our economy, right? Yeah, hello, Prof.
Yeah.
I'm saying that we should not be extremely happy and overconfident and think that we have done more than anybody could do as far as the performance of the economy based on the IMF's report, knowing very well that all these things are relative, and we anything can happen. Should we get the agreement, and based on what the agreement will be with the external creditors?
Right. So yeah, that's a very good question to ask. You see, I mentioned in my earlier submission that the lens that IMF uses to look into our economy to determine whether the economy is doing well or not is different from what we the citizens use. We shouldn't be so much happy because look, our economic growth, we cannot even boast of up to more than 3% by the end of the year. This economy, right? The World Bank just revised economic growth for Africa, and then the average is around 1.5% they are expecting by the end of the year. Now, this economy has grown up to 6% before at the time, 6.1%. Now, did you feel it in your pocket? Did you feel it through job creation and all those? Did you, get businesses walking easily to the bank to, access funds and then put it, invest in their business? No, we didn't see that. So we shouldn't be so much happy. Now, they are all part of, putting up, the structures in place. The fundamentals needs to be put in place before we realize, this economic growth that will build up into, I call that economic development. Because when the economy tickles down to your doorstep, then it becomes, a development in that regard. So from where I sit, we shouldn't be so much happy. We're going to see, that kind of back and forth as far as the exchange rate space is concerned. Government is going to, resume its full scale of, debt service. We should, appreciate that government will still be on the market to demand for funds in servicing its debt locally. And so we shouldn't expect interest rate to be coming down to a level where me and you can easily walk straight to the bank, to have access to funds at a cheaper cost. So it's not something that we should be so much happy, but it's good. We are making inroads. We can see some restrictions in terms of government spending here and there, which is a good signal. For me, because if government does not open up its spending, it controls the little revenue that government gets from the system. So from where I sit, I think yes, indeed, we are in the hands of IMF. There seem to be some controls, but then we shouldn't be so much happy because government is about to resume its full scale of, debt service.
Very well. Okateche, if you can unmute yourself and let's see this time we can hear you.
Yeah,
and if you're listening to us, you can also send us a request if you want to make a contribution or ask a question. Send us a request, be a speaker, we would quickly accept it. Okateche, speak and let's see if we can hear you this time.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying the conversation, and I want to now know if you can hear me, guys.
Yeah, hello, Okateche.
Yeah, hello. Can you hear me?
Wow. Well, we seem to be having a challenge with Okateche. He's not able to share. Hello.
Well, hello. Yeah, hello. Can you hear me now?
Okateche, we can hear you.
Oh, all right.
Okay. Go ahead. We can hear you.
Okay. Now, my question is very simple. With our finance minister publicly told Ghanaians that there is no way we should be going to IMF, or Ghana wouldn't go to IMF because the consequences are there. So I want to find out from Uncle Jackson or Prof that they should tell me maybe two key effects of we going to IMF that may affect not businesses but we individuals, or our should I say the value of our city in our local transactions. That's all I want to find out. That with that effect, or with those effects the finance minister was saying, they should limit it to we individuals, or we the normal or the ordinary Ghanaians, the effect of this IMF loan. Now that they've now driven us into IMF now, they should try and tell me as an individual what I should expect on my money or income. Yeah. Thank you.
So, Okechechie, thank you. Mr. Jackson can take over.
Okay, now, Okechechie, two things. The first of all is that some of us did not agree with the finance minister by saying when he said we shouldn't go to the IMF. We thought at that time we were so close to crashing as an economy that we needed the IMF bailout to come. Remember that if the bailout hadn't come and we had defaulted in a nasty way, we wouldn't be able to import anything. The cedi will go through the roof and life would have been unbearable. If you want to look at what happens if you default without an agreement or a bailout, look at what is happening to Lebanon. The standards of living have fallen. The exchange rate has gone many times through the roof. And there are no jobs and nothing happening. We think that we should have gone to the IMF earlier. I assure you, if the bailout hadn't come, the cedi would have gone past 30 cedis to $1. If the IMF bailout hadn't come, the price of drugs, nobody would be able to afford it because there are very few drugs that we produce internally. Even the jollof that we say is our national dish, the tomatoes are imported. The rice is imported. The chicken is imported. So, listen, as much as the IMF bailout may impose conditions that the government may find it difficult to bear, I will tell you this. The alternative was going to be worse. And worse still, if the government had been cutting its coat according to its size and not borrowing as much as it did, we would not have needed to go to the IMF. We went to the IMF because we borrowed so much we couldn't pay. We went to the IMF because we kept borrowing till it was really, we were broke. We couldn't service our debts. So rather than ask how badly the IMF is affecting us, we should be asking ourselves that what is the government doing to make sure that in its prioritization, right, the worst effects of having somebody make sure you are now cutting your coat to fit your size, the worst parts are mitigated. I'll give you an example. Over the last few days, we've had conversations about the price of dialysis at Kolebu. And there's some people who are intimating that it is the IMF conditionalities that have increased taxes that has caused the price of the dialysis drugs to go as high as they have. And so Kolebu doesn't have a choice. I beg to disagree. The IMF will set you a ceiling or a target for taxes you should collect. You will decide how to allocate those taxes. And if you decide to put taxes on dialysis drugs, instead of cutting the size of your government, instead of cutting the huge spending on consumption programs, it is your choice. It is not the IMF. The IMF is a big brother who has stepped in to say, hey, my friend, you need to bring in some revenue. You decide what are your priorities. At this moment, Our priorities are not in dialysis drugs. Our priorities are in another dimension. So truly, Okateche, when you feel the pinch, most probably somebody somewhere has made choices that make you feel the pinch. Thank you, Norvan.
All right, thank you very much. Let me ask the very last question in this round, and then we'll move to the next topic to discuss. What happens if we don't get the agreement from our external creditors? This question is to the two of you, both Professor Lord Mensah and then Mr. Jackson. Let me start with you, Prof. What happens if we don't get the agreement? What's going to happen to us? Hello, Prof. Okay,
Hello?
if we are not getting... Okay,
Yeah.
yes, Prof. And my question is, what if we don't get the agreement from our external creditors?
Of
What
course,
if?
the impact is going to be a huge one. The last time I checked, our balance of payment was around 3 to 4 weeks. And so if we do not get an agreement, and the second tranche is tied to getting external creditors agreement. So if we don't get it, and we don't get a 600 million, I think this country will be in trouble. And possibly we may start having problems with the exchange rate, because our buffers will completely go down. And when governments start tapping into, a balance of, payment support, satisfying its, dollar obligations, we know the economic consequence. So it's going to be a huge one. But I can tell you that we're going to get agreement, because, as I mentioned in my earlier submission, there are benchmarks across the globe. Zambia's case was more or less, westerners. They visited IMF several times before they even got, a staff level, agreement. So there are benchmarks. I can tell you, most of the sovereign debt engagement with the IMF and the external creditors got delayed, because the external creditors themselves did not know how they can fashion out most of the restructures that they're supposed to have with the various countries that owed them and they were about to default. But now that there are examples around, and they can, rely on them to come up with a very decent agreement, and that is supposed to help, our economy. So from where I sit, we're going to get agreement, and the investor perspective matters, in getting an agreement. Government struggled in the local restructuring because, it was new to us. And the approach government adapted was also more or less kind of a Rambo style of, debt restructuring, because the sensitization was very, very minimal. Government did not sensitize, the Ghanaian investor very well. I'm talking about portfolio investors, who have invested, in government instruments. And so we had problems in our local environment. But a typical, external investor who is putting his money in an African terrain, which Ghana is one of them, they know the economic consequence, at least. And they know the returns they were making on the kind of investment, they did with us. Whilst we were giving them, 7% on their bonds, Americans were giving them 1.5 and then 1.0, huge premium of about 6% thereabout. So if you are a bondholder, you're still a bondholder, and then you've held the bond for about 7 years, held the bond for about 8 years. Obviously, you are close to recouping, your principal, if you take into consideration what we call duration analysis in your bond holdings. So effectively, the investor, external investor, understands, the investment space than, what those investors in Ghana. And so we're definitely going to get agreement. I'm sure, 100% sure, that we're going to get, external credit agreement on this.
Very well, Prof. Thank you very much. Thank you very ladies and gentlemen, if you have been listening or you've just joined us, this is the Norvan Reports to the space. And Mr. Jackson, I've heard you on that. What if?
First of all, I agree with Prof. Lord Mensah. Geopolitics are in our favor. The benchmarks, the global benchmarks are in our favor. And unfortunately, this economy does not have a history or legacy of trickling down the effects of our macroeconomic improvement, the growth rate, etc. So from where you are sitting, your pain is high. But to be fair, the GDP growth rate, etc., are looking much better than they've been in a long while. So I believe that the agreement will be reached, and that we will get the money. Otherwise, you're going to see a dramatic fall in the value of the cedi, and it's all its corresponding ill effects.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Jackson. And if you just joined us, this is the Norvan Report Twitter Space Conversations. Thank you very much for being with us tonight. We move on now to our next topic, a very important topic. So somewhere this week, the minority and many other groups in the country decided to demonstrate. And what was the main aim of the demonstration? The main aim of this demonstration was to ask the governor of the central bank to resign from his post. What is their reason? The central bank governor and his deputies with his management have not handled the economy appropriately. They think they have run the economy down, created huge debts that is sitting on our books as far as the central bank is concerned, and many other things that they have blamed the governor for it. They were of the strong view that the governor must resign. That was their notion. But I'm going to just read something shortly for all of us. A write-up from Bright Simmons, which he titled, "Why the Bank of Ghana Governor is Guilty." You can go to Norvan Report. This article is there as I speak. Why the Bank of Ghana is guilty, and especially the governor, because he went for the jugular, let's put it that way, where he thinks that the governor is guilty of the offense, and for that matter, and he has chronicled and given us various reasons why the governor is guilty and for which reason he should be resigning or be leaving his post as it is. Ladies and gentlemen, after the demonstration, if we all remember, the governor did not come out to meet the demonstrator, none of his deputies, and none of the directors at the central bank. They sent the head of security, well, also part of the directors of the central bank, to come and receive the petition. The minority leader, Kisela Toforson Honorable, indicated that it is the governor they wanted to meet or any of his deputies. They were not interested in meeting the head of security at the central bank, and so refused to tender in their petition and decided and warned and said they were going to be back. After that, the central bank governor gave an interview, not to a Ghanaian media, to the centralbanking.com, an international news website. And he said to have described the demonstration. And let me quote something from the demonstration. He said, Dr. Addison, in an interview with the international business website, Central Banking, said he is not stepping down, describing the protesting minority MPs and NDCs and others as hooligans and the OccupyBOG demo as completely unnecessary. This is a quote from a news website that the governor gave an interview to. He's said to have given an interview to and said to have made this statement. This infuriated members of the minority, and they have indicated that clearly they will show him what hooligans do. This is the aftermath of this demonstration. Is it right for the governor to have described these people as hooligans? Is it right for the governor to have described the protest as unnecessary, completely out of line, and a waste of time? Is he a governor that is just being one of those people, pompous, disrespectful, who has no room to tolerate any other views? Is that the kind of person he is? Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is another issue on the floor before we end today's. Let me hear from Professor Lord Mensah. Prof, you have followed this, and I'm sure you heard. But before Prof comes in, let me remind you that if you want to be part of this discussion, send us a request. We'll make you a speaker to ask your question or make your point, or tweet at Norvan Reports, and we'll ask your questions on your behalf. Prof, what do you make of the governor's comments?
Yeah, Novan. You see, the happenings at the BOG, and then the demand from the citizens to for the governor to resign, it's not surprising because the numbers that we are witnessing, as far as inflation is concerned, and then the interest rate structures, is quite unprecedented. And as far as this Fourth Republic is concerned, from 2000, we've never recorded high inflation of that sort before. And somebody will say, why? What has inflation got to do with governor's resignation? You see, those numbers that we see are hard numbers, and these numbers comes as a result of soft decisions that are taken by the BOG and the government. And the governor is serving two different, structures as far as the economy is concerned. The governor is serving the citizens, making sure that there's price stability, control of inflation, and all those. In fact, the expectations of inflation needs to be controlled as well. And then we're looking at a governor who is also, serving his kingmakers. I'm looking at the president who appointed him, and then, the government in general. So the governor is torn between, serving citizens and then serving his kingmakers, which is the government of the day. But I can tell you that this governor couldn't balance the equation well. Under normal circumstance, he should have been able to balance it in such a way that, the citizens will not feel like the governor is listening too much to the government. And the same way, government will not feel like, oh, this governor has ignored us. I think Governor Addison did not play it safe in that regard. I'm looking at the respect that Governor Addison has for the citizens. And through that, you could see from, what happened at the demonstration and his response. He places too much weight to his kingmakers compared to the citizens, forgetting that it's the citizens' taxpayers' money that is being used, to take care of him. So from where I sit, I think it has to do with, his priority in terms of serving the country and then also looking at the government. And we are talking about how, the central bank should operate in such a way that monies can move to and from the economy. We have a governor. I'm not saying that as a governor or as a central bank, when the economy is running down, maybe through COVID, through Ukraine war, through whatever war, or through whatever global shock that you don't have control over, you're not supposed to come to a rescue of the nation. There are several ways of coming to a rescue. The first one, which, clearly, the Bank of BOG's mandate, right, is to ensure that, the central bank uses the monetary corridors. If I say monetary corridors, I'm talking about the banks and the financial systems to make sure that money moves into the economy. And that is what is done everywhere globally. If economies are going down, the Feds usually reduce their interest rate. Why do they reduce their interest rate? Because they want funds to be cheap to re-energize the economy. But then we have a central bank governor who is pretending over a situation where, there's a floating money, right? Money that is to be used to rescue the economy. But that money was not channeled through the monetary corridors, but the monies were channeled through the fiscal corridors, to the government. And you see, Novan, it's not by chance or it's not just by law to have, the 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 the, the, the quantum of monies that the central bank can extend to the government being, capped at 5% of revenue expected, or the previous year's revenue. There is a reason for that, because the perspectives are different. As a central bank, whether government comes or government goes, you should be able to maintain your position to keep the economy in a what? Safe footing. But when you extend funds to the governments, operate. Those who are going to handle it are policymakers, and they are the same politicians who have a 4-year cycle. So the way they will spend the money, right, is for them to win elections, possibly sending the money into sectors of the economy that, will not have impact on the citizens, or that will not grow the economy. Bank of Ghana claim to have printed money to rescue this economy. Has the economy been rescued? That's the question we need to ask ourselves. In other parts of the world, when such a decision is taken, when the Feds reduce their interest rate and funds get into the economy at a cheaper cost, quickly you get what? Response to that. You will see businesses expanding, you will see businesses growing, and they grow with the number of people they employ. It's unfortunate in Ghana we don't have the real-time collection of data on employment, which I think it should be the next phase of project. For us to see how the economy is growing at each point in time. So effectively, this central bank, the current state of the central bank, talking about Governor Addison and his team, did not do the right thing. If you go into the Bank of Ghana's Act, the emphasis is on monetary policy, meaning that the central bank should always use the banking system or the financial system. If I say the banking system, our economy is dominated by the banking sector. The financial market is very, very minimal. So we're looking at using the banking system to ensure that money moves in and out of the economy. Is that what we saw? We did not see that. Now, it has gotten to a point where, as a result of the Bank of Ghana's operation, we are struggling to bring inflation down, because any attempt to increase monetary policy rate, you are to catch up inflation, you are also fueling interest rates to go up. So we are more or less in a stalemate, struggling to catch inflation, but then, increasing policy rate feeds into the interest rate structures, and you will see treasury bill rate going up, you see cost of funds, going up. So the economy is in trouble. So calling for the head of the governor, for me, was in the right direction. But then let's look at the avenues that, the pressure group, right, could have tapped into to make sure that the governor resigns. Whether the option of being on the street was the best. And I believe that the option of being on the street is the best. The reason why I'm saying this is that the first, option, which is supposed to be the political pressure means that the government who appointed, the governor should have called him to say that, hey, the numbers are not looking good, my friend. We gave you the tax to make sure that you deliver, up to 8 to 10% GDP. We have a GDP target. How fast are you approaching it? How slow are you approaching it? You are rather deviating from it. So we are not happy with you. I mean, leave your pen down and then leave your post. But can we trust the government to do that? This is the government that we've had a finance minister, and I call them the trio who are creating trouble for the economy. We have a finance minister who was not even sure whether we should go to IMF or not. And at the end of the day, his own, parliamentarians, about 80 of them, were calling for his head. And the president promised that we should allow him to engage the IMF. After we've started engaging the IMF, he's going to make sure that, we revisit, the finance minister's resignation. Are we going back there again? We've not seen anything of that sort. So I believe that the citizens and then the minority who formed almost 50% of the country's representative in parliament, cannot trust, that kind of, route in ensuring that, the governor leaves his post. Another, option would have been the legal, system to go to court. But the minority in parliament, as we speak now, have lost trust in the judiciary. So I don't think that would have been, an option on the table. Another option would have been, the internal board or the committees within the Bank of Ghana to put pressure on the governor to resign. But then, what do we see in Ghana?
How do you,
when,
Prof?
hello?
The people,
Yes.
the internal committees and the
board.
people you are talking about, the board were appointed
Yes.
by the president.
Yes,
the president
they were appointed by the president, but the question
and
is,
the management is, and don't forget that the board chairman and the head of economic management team is still the governor himself.
You see, let me tell you one. Novan, let me tell you one thing. You see, if you are a board member and you are not a type who will say yes sir, and you don't see yourself as if the board membership that you find yourself in is a privilege, but not on merit for you to be there, that is when you will keep quiet. If you have a chairman who is the governor and is leading, your team, bring your output, getting into a direction which is not good for the economy, you should be able to voice yourself out. That is why we have independent board members who are not affiliated, who are not tied to anybody. So effectively, I was expecting at least one or two coming out to put some pressure to say that no, they are not happy. Even if one of them resign from that, board, it could have sent a signal that, hey, things are not going on well within, the Bank of Ghana. But we didn't see that. Everybody is mute. They all, sitting down there and this thing is happening. So effectively, I was expecting the board pressure or committee pressure, but that was not something that we saw. Now let's look at the last one before I come to the public pressure, which we saw, out of it, we got this demonstration, happening. The last one is international pressure. You see, IMF. I'm really disappointed with this World Bank, the IMF and all those. Sometimes they seem to be doing business with us. They just want to watch us falling into the ditch and coming to them so that we sit on the round table. We've created jobs for them. Somebody is working because Ghana is in trouble. And as a result of that, somebody must be appointed, country director, whatever, country rep on Ghana's debt negotiations. He travels to Ghana, gets his allowance. So when countries are getting into trouble, they see it, but they don't complain. I'm really disappointed in them because I was expecting them to come out to say that, hey, the way your inflation has hit, your interest rate, your yield curve is now inverted. And I always emphasize on the yield curve because that is what promotes the business cycle in every economy. We have short-term interest rate higher than the long-term. And it has stayed like that for the past 9 months to almost a year now. You can never build any economy with that kind of yield curve where there's pressure on short-term financing. You can't finance long-term investment with 91-day treasury bill, 182 treasury bill, and 1 year treasury bill. So IMF should have come out to issue a statement. I'm not saying they are stakeholders, but then they should they have issued a statement to give the signal that the performance of the economy, looking at the numbers that we see, the governor of Bank of Ghana is not doing his job well. But we didn't see that. So I believe, and where I sit, the option of going on the street is the best option for the citizens to hold the BOG governor accountable. So,
all right. So, Prof,
Norvan,
I want you to hold on here. Let me bring you Mr. Jackson before you come in with the other side, so that we are able to get everybody's comment. But, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to be part of this discussion, what you do is to either tweet at Norvan Reports, or you the other thing that you do is to quickly send us a request to be a speaker. Oh, we've just lost Mr. Jackson. Okay, Prof, please, before Mr. Jackson come in, you still have the floor to complete your
I was about to land. So from
yes,
where
go ahead, Mr. We've lost Mr. Jackson. I'm sure you come back. Yes,
being on the street is the best option, and I was surprised the governor was tagging those who attended the demonstration as hooligans, and that the demonstration wasn't necessary. From where I sit, it was necessary, because that's supposed to be the best option for Ghanaians to be heard. That, look, things are not good. No, man, people are suffering. No, people are suffering. If you want to know what a typical Ghanaian goes through, pick a trotro from my junction here, New Botiano Junction, and then sit at the back, all the way to Medina. People hopping off on and out, in and out. You appreciate what a typical Ghanaian, goes through in a day. We live in an economy where you take your salary, 40% is already wiped off as a result of price increase. And I don't expect anybody, right, to tell me that this economy is doing well when we are seeing, these numbers. And I always say that those numbers are hard numbers, but the non-performance and the boardroom decisions and all those that were taken is what is being reflected in the numbers. Thank you. Hello, Norvan.
Yeah, Prof, I'm here.
Yes, over to you.
So ladies and gentlemen, at this discussion, how do you feel about the governor's comments? Calling the demonstrators hooligans and all that. I think Mr. Jackson is here. So, Mr. Jackson, Prof, let me just get Mr. Jackson's comment, and then I'll come back to you. So, Mr. Jackson, how do you feel about the comments from the governor, regarding this demonstration? Hello, Mr. Jackson.
Yes, Norvan, I'm here.
Yeah. So, how do you feel about the governor's comments, regarding the demonstration that is asking for his removal?
The comments should be put into context. First of all, the governor is the one responsible for price stability in the Constitution of Ghana. He's also responsible for exchange rate stability, among other things. He's supposed to promote the development of this country and to make sure that the financial sector is healthy. It is in the Constitution. So when there is a massive failure of that role coming out of his own results that he published, showing a $5 billion loss or 60 billion CD loss, it is fair when the people of this country, through their representatives and others, raise questions on what happened and maybe even demand that he resigns. When you may say it is not his fault, but should there be a discussion as to how an entity that is owned by the people of Ghana ended up with the results that it did? That debate should be there. when you look at that context, and the people have a peaceful expression of their right under democracy, under the Constitution, they express a peaceful expression of their rights to request that you leave because you have caused them. You should not be arrogant. You should not write them off. You should not behave as if you don't understand the particular pain that each and every Ghanaian is going through. An inflation rate of 50% and inflation went as high as 50% and over. Even the reduced inflation we are talking about now is still in the 40%. That means that prices have doubled and in some cases tripled in the period under review of 1 year. Please, that has to be understood. And it is your responsibility as governor. So this issue of sitting in what I call the ivory tower, far removed from the pain of Ghanaians, and calling them all sorts of names, especially our elected representatives, has a lot of challenges. Norvan, over to you.
So Mr. Jackson, he says that the demonstration was very unnecessary, probably describing it as an illegitimate form of asking for his removal. Is that fair comment, saying that there are processes you can use to ask for his removal, but not to go on the streets? Is it fair for him to say that?
Well, what the processes for his removal may be there, but we also know that given the extreme partisanship that exists now, those processes won't get very far. In any case, something not being necessary does not make it illegal. Does not make the people hooligans. You may say this is not necessary, fine, but you didn't say it was illegal. You didn't say it was erroneous. No, all you said was that it was unnecessary. Fine, it wasn't necessary. Maybe it wasn't, but it wasn't illegal. And so your response should be a little bit more measured.
Prof, you were trying to make a point, and that is what brings about this question of, well, you know what? You know the appointing authority. Why don't you go to him? Why do you come and ask me? If my boss who I work for thinks my work is okay, who are you to come and tell me that my work is bad?
No, man. I mentioned earlier, the possible means that the citizens can get the governor off his table, off his desk. The first one, I said the political pressure. You see, the trust in the appointing authority is not there. And that is why it was not even part of the route that the minority was looking out for. And remember, the minority forms about 50% of parliament. And that is a reflection of 50% of Ghanaians. And so we shouldn't see it to be a party thing. That is, I don't see it that way. And more so, I look at the potency of what they carry and then the impact that they wanted to, make. If they deliver it directly to the governor, telling him to resign, it's not the president who is pushing him away. It's the governor that is resigning at his own will. For him to accept that he's driven the economy to a level where, it's unbearable for Ghanaians. They want him to do the honorable thing, not to force somebody to force him out. So you should understand what is on the grounds. And so effectively, fine, I appreciate that the governor did not appoint himself. He was appointed by the president. And so if you want to get him out, you may have to use the same process. But here is the case. The president has never sacked anybody before in his government. The president, when the finance minister's head was being called, he promised us we should allow him some time. Has he revisited it? No. So the trust is not there to use that route, Norvan. And that is why we saw that public pressure yielding into demonstration on the high street to submit a letter. It's unfortunate. I mean, for the governor to demonstrate, again, as I started my earlier submission, his disrespect for citizens. You see, that disrespect came out clearly in his own response. And it is out of this disrespect for the citizens that his decision has driven the economy, with inflation getting to 54% and having it to reduce numerically to 40%, and it's still not making economic sense because it's still higher than interest rates structures in the economy. So it is he's a governor who respects his kingmakers more than the citizens, and that is why he turned out to call the demonstrators hooligans, and then saying that the demonstration wasn't necessary. Whether it was necessary or not, I know very well that demonstration will not yield any results, but it has sent a signal. It has sent a signal that the people are not happy with what is going on. So you better sit up as a governor, whether you were there to receive it or not, and then whether the demonstrators will come back again or not. I know it will not yield any results, but it has sent a signal, because this is my lifetime. This is the first governor who has gotten a demonstration against his activities as a governor. So from where I sit, I think the route of using, his kingmakers, wasn't an option on the table. Thank you.
Very well, Prof. Ladies and gentlemen, there's a question on the floor, and the question is: do you think that the governor is just being quote unquote arrogant and disrespecting Ghanaians? I don't know what your thoughts are. You can tweet at Norvan Reports, or you can also send us a request, and then we'll allow you to tell us what you think, or what your question is, or your contribution is on this the aftermath of the BOG demonstration. Comments from the central bank governor. What your thoughts are, and then try to answer
my response to that question is yes. The governor has been extremely arrogant. For that response, I think he can identify, the people he's serving. Like I said earlier, he's placed more weight to the respect of his kingmakers than we, the citizens. And that is why we got those response from him.
All right, thank you very much, Prof. Mike Ampene tweets: there is a lot of criticisms of the governor. I am curious what monetary policy tools. Okay, so I'm curious. What monetary policy tools do you think he ought to use if the inflationary pressures are not of a money supply issue? Prof, this question is for you.
Right. So, Norvan, we all appreciate at the point in time we saw that the monetary policy is not being effective. And why was it not being effective? It's as a result of the fiscal policies. You see, government is spending its way. And what is happening is that the current governor was fueling that spending out of, I don't know whether it's out of ignorance or is as a result of just to satisfy, his kingmakers. The monetary policy tools will be effective if you spend wisely. Let's assume that we're trying to catch up inflation. But then on the fiscal side, government is spending into areas that is supposed to make sure food prices comes down. We've had planting for food and jobs for all these years. And to a point where, what do we call it? Our budget allocations for planting for food and jobs alone every year on the average was around 6 million, Ghana cedis. So I was expecting that, at this time, food inflation shouldn't be, what we call it, shouldn't be our inflation, driver. Now, as a governor, you serve as a bank to the government. So that means that government financing will come through your corridors. Now, if I'm a bank and I'm supposed to, monitor your accounts, how you manage it, at the point where I realize that most of your spending are not being effective, I advise you. And that is why I mentioned earlier that the governor has given too much respect to the policy maker, which is the government. And so if you ask me what other monetary policy tools can the governor use, apart from we criticizing the governor, we are saying that the governor should have advised the government on the fiscal side, because the monetary policy alone will not catch up what? Inflation, when the fiscal, spending is not disciplined enough, getting into critical areas that will what? Fuel up economic growth, that will, reduce inflation. So the governor should have, looked at the other side as well, the fiscal side. And it looks like the governor was even fueling the budget deficit that, government was creating, knowing very well that you've been blocked from the international market. There are no avenues for, deficit financing. And therefore, you may have to finance, within the country. And once there's pressure on government demand for funds within the country, interest rate will never come down. And then, so why don't you advise the government to reduce, its, budget deficit? And I can tell you that anytime a governor of a country disrespect the citizens and then pay too much respect to the government of the day, the government intends to read budget and you see huge deficit because he's going to get financing. In the worst case, there will be printing of what? Money to finance what? Those deficits. So the fiscal policies and the monetary policies are interrelated. So if you're a governor, you don't look at it one-sided. I hope that answers your question, Norvan.
Well, yeah. You can also come in with your request and we'll allow you to make your point or just send us a request. But Mr. Jackson, I think the same question comes to you. Do you agree with those who say that this governor has just been arrogant? And of course, if you look at the article that by Simmons wrote, Changing Habits, I'm going to read just a part of the Changing Habits for you. He says that he got into the apex role and everything changed. He began to push poorly conceived policies, such as forcing massive recapitalization requirements across the banking industry, when the real challenges were poor capital adequacy owing from years of failure to deal with toxic assets and poor corporate governance. Protests, warnings, and laments went unheeded. He stopped listening to the Independent Policy Committee, treating their views with contempt. Many specialized banks catering to niche segments of the economy were forced to close down for no sensible reason. Despite the brutal weeding out of small and specialized banks, capital adequacy continues to be a problem for a quarter of Ghana's banks, and the fruits of the failed recapitalization program are still shedding their seed on us. Very interesting statement made by Brad Simmons there. Mr. Jackson.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, I have to agree with Bright Simmons in that the underlying problems with there were underlying problems with the financial sector, and some of us were extremely excited when the governor took the action and started the cleanup. But it seems that somewhere along the way, the cleanup did not address the real issues, which were issues of poor corporate governance, especially amongst the institutions that were Ghanaian owned. And so we have a situation where a lot of the institutions that were left behind are still having problems. We have a situation where capital adequacy challenges have arisen albeit through the as a result of the debt exchange program. So you have to say that the governor himself, as by his by the end of this year, eroded the positive effects of his legacy from the first few years of his appointment as a governor. And in that sense, you have to agree that he has become arrogant and is not paying enough attention to what is happening at the bottom of the pyramid, or even to the pain of middle-class Ghana. Over to you, Norvan.
Very well, Mr. Jackson. Ladies and gentlemen, if there's anybody who has a comment, some say, and that's why I read changing happens, is for you to understand, the reason why some are saying he's arrogant, with some also saying that he's become a thing god on his own. Is that the case, Prof?
Yeah, well, I think his assurance is getting from his kingmakers. That is making him, behave in that manner. But from where I sit, if you have the citizens at heart, you won't make that statement. And so he knows that, definitely whatever work or public pressure, the president is not going to heed to that, because there's a case of that sort. And so, he deserves to act in that manner.
Very well. I'm going to ask my very last question, and then we'll bring the space to a close. And the question is, if we see the governor's moves or his policies as detrimental to the economy, well, he's made it very clear he's not going to resign. What should be the alternative in dealing with it? And if you had the opportunity to advise him, what would you say? Let me start with you, Mr. Jackson. Hello, Mr. Jackson.
Yes, sorry, my mic was muted.
Okay.
If I had occasion to advise the governor, first of all, I think that an apology to Ghanaians and to Parliament would be in order.
Sure.
It's not just a matter of doing the right thing or not doing the right thing. That can be debated. But you represent a public institution owned by the people of Ghana, and the perception of arrogance is not good enough. I think that an apology is owed to Ghanaians, and for whatever it's worth, he has to spend the rest of his term trying to rebuild the bridges that he has burnt. Right. The second thing is that there have been obvious issues to do with procurements, etc. There needs to be some more accountability and transparency in how the central bank works. The central bank is not a law unto itself. It's an institution owned by the good people of Ghana. So I would drive for a program of transparency and accountability, so that the perception that those in at the central bank are living in an ivory tower, far removed from the practical considerations of daily life, that perception should go away. Then we've got to address the underlying issues of the financial sector. And even though there is a drive towards what I will call repairing the regulatory lapses of the past, there must be some hard decisions taken. There must be some of the things that we've talked about, the stability fund and things, they must be addressed. And what he can do in this, in the second part of his second term, is to take a very aggressive approach to address the underlying ills of the financial sector. at the same time improving transparency and accountability. Norvan, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jackson. So, same question to you, your very final words. I mean, what would you say if you had the opportunity to get this governor down? Because he said it, he's not going to go anywhere. His term is not over. You can't take him out. Sorry, Prof. So, what would you say to him if you had the opportunity to sit in front of him and advise him in order to get the economy going? What would you tell him?
For every economic manager or a leader to come out from a mess, the first thing is you must accept that you've created a mess. You must accept that you've created a mess, and then tell Ghanaians how you're going to come out of the mess. We know very well that his association with the executive or the government is what has brought us, this far. And so what is he going to do for him to win back trust to the central government? Do you know, if you throw out a survey, right, to ascertain whether the central bank's, activities can control inflation, most people will tell you no. I'm telling you. And that is a reflection of trust eroded in the central bank. And so how are you going to, operate to restore this trust? And consistently, you must prove yourself. How do you prove yourself? Make sure that you become open enough. As we speak now, nobody knows how even the central bank recruits. I don't know how they recruit. I have not seen anywhere in the dailies to indicate that the central bank is recruiting, so put in your application. Neither have I seen it in the electronic media. So transparency, very, very important. So the governor should work out hard to ensure that he wins back the trust of Ghanaians. Other than that, the entire financial system that we are running, it will be a system without trust. And we know the economic repercussions when, you're operating a financial system without trust. So my advice would be for him first to accept that we are in a mess.
Yeah, hello, Prof.
Yeah, thank you, Norvan.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor Lord Mensah, and then Mr. Joe Jackson. In fact, we are ever more grateful for your time tonight. And ladies and gentlemen, this is where we will draw the curtains down. For those of you on TV, ABC News GH, thank you very much for your time tonight. And you've been listening to Professor Lord Mensah, who is an associate professor at the Department of Finance, University of Ghana Business School, and the Director of Operations, Delex Finance, Mr. Joe Jackson. We've been looking at a double header today, IMF Start Level Agreement. In fact, the two of them agree that we will be able to secure the next tranche of the money, even though there's a caveat from the IMF that we need an agreement from our external creditors. They are of the hope that the external creditors will give us the agreement, which will trigger the release of the next 600 million. So we're looking forward to that. And when it comes to the second topic that we looked at was the comments from the central bank governor, Dr. Ernest Addison, with regards to the OccupyBOG demonstration, which was led by the minority and other groups in the country. The agreement is, his comments are not good, not welcoming. He needs to apologize to the people of Ghana. He needs to admit also as well that indeed there are challenges in the policies being put forward by the central bank as far as the banking and the financial sector is concerned, and that there needs to be a second look at that. It has been another interesting conversation with you, ladies and gentlemen. We are grateful for your time. This has been another Norvan Reports Twitter Space conversation, and we can't be ever grateful for all of you who joined us this evening. Thank you very much. If you want to be able to read about our stories and what is happening in the world of business, would advise you to join www.norvanreports.com just go to www.norvanreports.com. And the story that we were referring to, why Bank of Ghana is guilty, is on our website at the moment, written by Bright Simmons. And so you can go there, click it, and read. We also have shared it in the URL in the space, so you can click on it and then read the full story, his points as to why the Bank of Ghana is guilty of the debts and all the issues, that are being raised against the governor. Just go there and then you'll be able to read that from there. And my name is Norvan Reports. Thank you for this.